Friendship comes easily with family, but not necessarily the other way around. Almost 75 years ago, my father went to college, and he was one of about 300 students that started together. And 7 years later, in 1953, the graduating class was 42 doctors. So it was no surprise that this very small group would become friends, and in some cases very close friends. A few years later, they were working together in their residency and in their remote locations to further their knowledge, and about 7 years later they were ready to do their specialty. So they spread around the world, each one in a different country, a different city, and for years they worked separately and specialized. When they went back home, they lived in separate cities, and over the years they kept in touch with each other. So one of my father's closest friends, well, became very close because they lived together when they were specializing for a short time. And several years later, when they went back to their country, each one of them lived in a city, but every time they went to the other person's city, they spent time with each other. We grew up very close to my father's friend and his family. But then our fathers retired, and we were spread all over the world, each in a different country. And time went on. A few years before my father passed, his friend's son called and said that he was in the same city we were, and he came over to visit my father with his family. My father was so happy. You could see the joy in his eyes. He was very happy to see his friend's son and his family. The kids were growing up. The grandchildren, of course, were getting ready to go to college as well. Out of the 8 children that the two families had, 5 of them were doctors. And so it was time for the second generation to kind of forge its way in the world. A couple of years later, my father passed away. That really saddened his friend. A few months later, I met up with him, and he was telling me of how much he missed my father and how close they were, even though they lived in 2 different cities, hardly saw each other. A couple of months after that, the friend passed away. His wife actually told me that she could see them walking together, nodding to each other, whispering like they always did. They were very quiet people. Well, years have passed. Some of the kids, the grandkids, are now living in the same city. They have become friends, close friends actually,